Hello friends, welcome back to the It's a Guitar YouTube channel. We've got an absolutely killer show-stopping amp here for you guys today. This is a 1963 Vox AC10 Twin, and this is actually the first AC10 Twin we featured on the channel, despite the fact that I happen to own one. So this is my personal 1964 that I've had for a long time, and I don't think I've ever featured on the channel in any significant way, certainly no series on it yet. That is to come, but we're going to focus on this one first. This is incredibly cool. This is a buddy of mine picked this up locally. I'm so happy he did. These are just incredibly rare amplifiers here in the US. Do not see them very often, and this configuration is extra cool. This is a copper panel. We'll get more into that later. You can see a beautiful brown grow cloth. Very cool. Lots of nice aging. This is a smooth Tolex amp as well, in comparison to the later rough Tolex style that's on mine. Very thin walled cabinet as well. You can see the little finger joints there. This is hallmark of the earlier amps versus the later amps where they got the thicker corners. And yeah, this thing just looks spectacular. I'm so excited to dive into it. So let's go ahead, real quick, look at the got the nice little brass vents, although they don't look nice and shiny anymore. That's okay. So I've already got the chassis out. Let's go ahead and flip over to the back side of the cabinet just to get a look at the speakers, the baffle, and the serial plate. First things first, the speakers. So obviously not great in here. The one on the left may be original. I'm not really sure. So this would have had Goodmans, I believe. I don't think Elacs were in this period. Maybe they were. But they look very similar with that kind of iconic coffee can style magnet, I guess you would call it. Small 10-inch speakers. The one on the right, obviously a replacement. And both look pretty rough. So the owner's looking for replacements right now. Maybe Elacs, maybe Goodmans, we'll see. But otherwise, the cabinet looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and take a look at the back plate. And here is the original back plate. Super cool. You can see right there at the top model number AC10. And then the serial number is 4048. So that looks great. And actually the Tolex is in pretty good condition. These are very fragile. And you don't see them in this condition very often. But yeah, it's a little bit of wear, but nothing bad. I mean, I've seen much worse. So pretty dang sweet. Now let's go ahead and pull the chassis out over onto the workbench. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this incredibly cool piece of Vox history here. It's quite dirty. We'll definitely want to clean it up a little bit, but I mean, look at that copper panel. So incredible to see just how simplistic the very early ones were. There's no design boxes or anything like you see in the later era copper top into the gray top. Just very simple. Just the names and flat copper. Very cool. Catching the light a little bit more there. Chassis looks like you expect. Pretty typical of these. You can see it has had a replacement F&T can cap there. It looks like dual 16, which is good, so it wasn't over filtered. So very clearly the first thing your eye will go to obviously is the power transformer here. I don't know what's going on exactly. We have to flip it over and take a closer look, but the bracket, all of this looks original. This middle, obviously the transformer itself does not. So possibly this was a rewind of the original, or it is a modern replacement and used some of the old hardware. I'm not really sure, obviously missing the bell cover either way. So got to do some research there. I'm pretty sure I've seen transformers that have this kind of claw setup around it, but I don't know what make those would be. So I'm pretty sure like Parmeco, Albion, very common you'll see in the AC10s. I'm not sure what transformer would have that. I have to look it up, but first glance, obviously this was replaced. And then look at the other transformers. This looks like an Albion to me. There's no marking on it on this side. There might be on the other side. We'll have to take a look. But this looks very typical and just like my own personal amp. And then this is the choke here. This is the output transformer. This is the choke. And there might be some writing under this electrical tape, but I'm sure this is disgusting because all electrical tape turns disgusting. And yeah, you can see that's gross. So we're just going to leave that as is for now. And we'll flip it over and see if there's any surprises under that later. But yeah, and this does look original to me as well. Mine is a Parmeco, not sure what this is, but not a huge deal. It's just a choke. All the tube sockets look original from what I can see from this side. So these are always pretty tricky to show on camera because of the weird, unconventional, shape of the chassis here. So I'm gonna try and get this so you guys can get a decent view. I have to grab something thinner. One sec. Before I forget, I just want to highlight this again. This killer switch. Look at this for the tremolo. So cool. Mine has the more egg style. It says Vox on it. So this is the earlier model, which is the round JMI button. Really cool to still have that with the amplifier. Those are obviously, that's unobtainium if you need to find one. So let's just take a quick look at it. Obviously, first and foremost, you can see WEMA caps everywhere, which is great to see. So this amp was not butchered with all of the coupling caps replaced. That's awesome. My 64 AC30 also uses WEMA, as well as my 64 AC10 SRT. So really great. These are great caps. They are kind of akin to a Fender Blue Molded, if in simple terms, where they tend to last a long time and they sound very good. So really good to see those. Those are probably all fine in my experience. We can also see it had the cathode bypass caps replaced. These are Sprague's 25 microfarad 25 volt. Not the best job in the world. I'll zoom in. You can see the solder joint's a little suspect in this whole area actually, but no big deal. They were replaced, which is good. Then we can see two other Sprague Atom caps here. This is normally a dual can cap that is in this position. They just replaced with two individual ones. I can't see the specs on them. Looks like they have electrical tape wrapped around it. So I'm not sure what those are. I think these are 10 microfarad caps, if I recall correctly, in the schematic, but we'll take a look in a second. And then otherwise, I'll zoom back out. Otherwise, we've got tons of replaced resistors. That's very common. These early Vox amps use these pretty low quality carbon comp resistors that tend to drift way up. These are not the same as Allen Bradley's that you see in Fender amps, which tend to fare better in my limited experience. We do see, it looks like a few different techs have been in this amp just based off the components and the work. You can see you got a carbon film here and a bunch of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 different types of resistors in this top part here. So maybe 4 different techs have been in it. But overall, I mean, whether it's been 2 techs or 4 techs, pretty much unmolested. I mean, the original pots are in here, which is fantastic. This all looks original to me. You can kind of see there's red markings all over stuff. That's what Vox did, or at least certain assemblers from Vox, is they had different people or different groups. Gosh, it starts with a W, the one that I believe did the paint, just like on my AC30, and then other eras you won't see that. So that's kind of cool. You can kind of identify what's been touched and what hasn't. And it looks very good. We'll have to test all of these resistors. We'll pull out the schematic and confirm they measure okay, and we'll very likely swap all of these with either carbon film or carbon comp. TBD on that, but that all looks very good. Inputs. Now there is a thing with these where you can add in parallel in another resistor to get the value closer to a typical 68K, I believe. And this doesn't look like it's been modded, so we'll have to play with that a little bit. I'm not sure if mine has that or not, but I have heard that as a kind of a common suggestion with these AC10 amps. If you don't really know about them, they, were kind of handicapped a little bit from the factory by Vox to differentiate them from the AC15. Power section is very similar. So yeah, just little tweaks you can do to kind of liven them up a bit. But otherwise, I'm very happy with everything I see here. Nothing catastrophic by any means. And then this is where things get funky. So we already mentioned the power transformer. You can see 2 leads from the power transformer going right here. And you can't really see from your view, but I'll show in a second. They're going through to the bottom part of the chassis. You've got some kind of rubber going on here for whatever reason. We've got the 3-prong right here, just kind of crimped on, which is a pretty poor way to do that. So we'll definitely want to probably redo all of this. You can see we got some kind of little cap here, little 0.01 cap on the power switch. I don't know if the power switch is original. It does say RS on it, radio spare, so it might be a kind of an old replacement, possibly. I'm not really sure. It doesn't look the same as other ones I've seen. the switch itself. So I can show that. Camera focus. There it goes. Yeah, so this looks like it's been messed with. That doesn't look factory to me, but who knows? It's a cool old part. And then obviously you can see the selector switch was not wired up. So whoever did the power transformer swap, they took apart all of the other connections, and I don't see any extra wires around for different voltages. So presumably this power transformer is specifically for American 120 volt from the wall. So making this, rendering this useless. So yeah, everything looking pretty good though. We do have an added fuse, which is very typical with these because the fuse would have been in the plug itself, which you know, is a UK thing, not a thing in America. It's got a nice little 3-prong here, pretty short. Probably want to put a longer one. But yeah, looking good. I'm really happy with this so far. Power transformer, not a big deal. I'm assuming it's giving the right voltages. I've talked about this many times in the past. You know, 300 volts is 300 volts. It does not matter where it's coming from. I strongly believe that. Several of my amps have replaced power transformers. It has no effect on the tone. So don't worry about that. Obviously, it will hit the collector value a little bit, but you know, if you're buying the amp to enjoy and play, in addition to, you know, not losing your shirt on it, there's nothing really to be afraid of, in my opinion. All right, that's a much better view now. So again, we got the output transformer. See the 8 ohm conveniently shrink wrapped for us there. This all looks great. Nothing wrong looking with the output transformer. You can see just how thin gauge the wires are off this thing. It's pretty wild if you think about it. So very, very fragile leads coming off the output transformer. You got the F&T cap replacement. And then you got your bias resistor right here. The replacement bias cap. 50 microfarad, 50 volt. I'm not sure the schematic says for these. I know the AC30 is a much larger cap. So I have to look at that. And yeah, look at this a little bit closer. So obviously we got replacement resistors for this here. So we've got, let's see, pin 1, 2, pin 2 and EL84 is the grid. This is your grid stops, 1.5Ks. Those look pretty toasted. I imagine those, they might be fine. We'll have to test them. And then we've got pin 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is the plate. So these are your plate resistors. And then obviously you can see the connection here for the output transformer. That all looks fine. Replace resistors, not a huge deal. So no screen resistors, I guess. So I got to consult the schematic for all of this just to make sure that that's all copacetic. And then moving over here to the power transformer, let's slide all this down so you can see it a little bit better. Obviously, we've got the heater supply coming from the top. So those are going here to an added tag strip. And they've got an artificial center tap here. So there's no center tap off of the power transformer. And then you can see all the brown leads are the heaters going everywhere. You can see the HT center tap, which is this red and yellow one, going again to a tag strip, which is screwed into the chassis. That's for your ground. And then you got the HT right here and running over to the rectifier tube. And then these two leads right here and here that were snipped, I'm not sure what those would be for. There's no markings anywhere I see on the transformer to tell us what it is. I will say that this wire that they used looks exactly like the Mercury magnetics. In fact, let me grab one of those snippets because I have some from other transformers I've swapped. So they're swapped off. They also use, I believe, the red and yellow for the HT center taps. So it looks like a match to me. So this might be a Mercury Magnetics, or maybe there's another company that uses the same wire. I do have some other brand transformers like Mojo Tone, which don't use the same wires. So who knows? Not really sure. Possibly just a custom rewind or something from Mercury or otherwise. No idea. But yeah, overall, I am really, really encouraged by what I see. Nothing crazy going on. I mean, obviously we can clean the work up, but that's par for the course. I expect that. So some shoddy solder joints here and there, but nothing crazy, nothing too bad. It was not hacked, which is really, the bar is there. You know, you don't want it to be hacked, and we can totally just clean this thing up. So awesome. I guess now what we want to do is we'll go ahead. I'll probably take this connection off, and we'll test it with an 8 ohm load, see if we get some voltage. Just make sure it's outputting. That the owner did say that it was outputting at the store, so so it should work fine. It was running the 16 ohm tap. We'll confirm the 8 ohm tap is okay. We'll check the voltages and just see what we're working with. So let's get set up for that. Okay, so I went ahead and just temporarily heat shrunk the 16 ohm tap here, connected the 8 ohm tap, which is such a smaller wire, very interesting. And that's connected to a 1/4 inch plug, which is going into an 8 ohm cab beside me here. So we have that load. We got the tubes back in the amplifier. And I already turned it on just to make sure we do have output, and we do. So now we can go ahead and just start measuring some things. I also have here on my phone a copy of the Vox book, the Vox Tech book by Stephen Gravesner, something like that. And so we can kind of start jotting down the voltages we're seeing versus the schematic and just make sure everything is healthy from high level. And then we'll get kind of narrow our scope further as we go along. But we're just going to start high level here. So let's go ahead and get the variac going. We'll set it to 120 volts. Since it's a replace power transformer, I'm hoping that it was designed to kind of keep the voltage from being too high, but we'll see. So 120 volts, go ahead and turn it on. We got all the volume knobs down. Lovely glow. You guys should be able to see this here. So the first thing we're going to look at is the leads off of the power transformer here, seeing what they're doing. I'm going to check what these cut leads are doing first. 46 volts, 50 volts on those two cut leads. So I don't know if those are supposed to be a bias supply or something. Not sure. So let's go ahead and check the high voltage here. $266. Okay, the schematic says it should be about 300 volts, so we're not too far off there. Not actually necessarily a bad thing having it lower. Could be easier on everything. Let's see what our heaters are at. .2 volts on one side, which should give us about 6.4, so that's looking good. Which is what you'd expect of the new transformer, again, made for 120 volt from the wall. So now we're gonna go ahead and check DC, and on the output of the rectifier, .314, schematic calls for 320, so that's perfect. So we should be seeing, after the choke, a drop to about 300 volts. Right on the money. It says 305 on the schematic, we're at 306, so that's perfect. All right, this is looking very good. Okay, cool. Now we can go ahead and check the plates. .294, .295, that's right on the money. And we do see the schematic says it's 100 ohm resistors, which is what it has in it now. Continue on, see what the bias voltage is at. 10.27. So let's go ahead and check the bias real quick. Pretty easy to do on an amplifier like this. We just have to measure the resistor with the amp off. So let's do that real quick. It's like just under 128, should be 130. So that's pretty dang good. Let's run that through the bias calculator real quick. All right, so you can see with 295 volts on EL84s, two tubes sharing the same cathode resistor measuring 128 ohms, 10.3 volts across that resistor, and we are getting 93%. So this thing is running very, very good. Love to see that. Everything I'm seeing is very good here, guys. So I'm very excited for the owner. This is such a cool amp. I'm so happy he got this. And it looks like it's, just going to be kind of just cleaning it up, making it look nice, and just kind of fine tuning. But otherwise, it's seeming very, very good. So we're going to end here tonight, though. We'll pick it up tomorrow after I talk to the owner and kind of go through some next step options. So let's get to that. So I spoke to the owner and we are good to move forward with the project. So first things first, let's just go ahead and hear it real quick as a baseline, just running it directly into the aux box through the 8 ohm load. We'll just load up some random cab in there, a random Vox cab in there, just to give us something to listen to as we test the normal and vibrato channels, just kind of see through the sweep here to make sure there's nothing funky going on. and then also check the cut control and the tremolo. The owner did say when he bought it, the trem worked. So we'll confirm that's working okay. And these do have an interesting trick where depending on how the pot is wired, in the vibrato channel with the trem off, you can actually get a gain boost through the EF86 tube here based off of maxing out the amplitude or minimizing it depending on how it's wired. So we'll have to see how this one is. Mine is wired backwards on my AC10 Twin. So, and then we'll also check the input jacks to make sure which one's high and which one's low. I think these ones are high, but we'll do a quick test of that. And then after we're done just hearing it real quick, we will pull up a schematic and do a bit of a deeper dive and really figure out the game plan. So let's get to it. Alrighty, so I did also record with my phone for the owner through my original AC10's cabinet with the original ELACs, the little 10-inch ELAC speakers, just so he can kind of hear it through a cabinet. And depending on how that came out, I might mix that in versus the Auxbox audio if that didn't come out very good, just for testing purposes either way here. But you guys can hopefully hear the normal channel is definitely less gainy and warmer sounding than the vibrato channel. That makes sense. This tube, it's a 6U8A, which is a very unique tube. You don't see, I don't know of any other amplifiers that use it actually. It's very low gain value. I read somewhere something like a 12AY7 kind of equivalent. So very, very low gain, but it still sounds very good. And then the EF86, obviously a much higher gain tube, and so the vibrato channel naturally has more gain to it as well as more top end. Other things to note, so it seemed like the tone control kind of didn't really do, well obviously it's a cut control, didn't really do anything between this range. I haven't played mine in a bit, so I can't remember if mine's the same way or not. But it really kind of starts activating a little past noon, and then you get pretty strong change around here. I don't think that's abnormal. I think that's pretty normal for these, so I'm not too worried about that. The vibrato channel is very noisy, and the normal channel sounds great, seems pretty quiet. There is a low-level hum that is kind of constant, so I have to check that out. Maybe a heater thing, although it does have artificial center tap, so I'm not really sure. Maybe they didn't disconnect a ground connection or something. But the vibrato channel has tons and tons of noise going on. I don't know if it came through for you guys, but very obvious in the room. The tremolo does work. It is wired backwards like I believe mine is. So the minimum setting is the maximum amplitude. And then obviously all the way up is vice versa. And then it did seem like the gain, so you do get a gain boost with the vibrato channel with the trem off. And normally it's if you have, I think, the maximum amplitude, you get a gain boost on my other one, but this one seems to be the opposite, at least to my ears. It seemed like the minimum amplitude gave it the most. I'm not really sure. I got to look into that a bit more. But interesting regardless. Speed seemed to work totally fine. Pretty usable range. And then these are the high inputs. These are the low inputs. So yeah, overall pretty dang solid. Very, very good bones here. So now I think I took the tubes out here, made a note for myself just because it can be confusing since it's all the same tube sockets. So all of that out of the way, we'll take the preamp tubes out, and then we'll go ahead and pull up a schematic and really check things out. Got the chassis mounted in a way that hopefully the camera, you guys will be able to see. I can't see this whole section, but I think the camera can see it. And then also the bottom section here. This is very awkward to film these amplifiers. I do want to note there's foam under this to protect the knobs. It's not just resting on it. So I just want to note that. But yeah, I want to just kind of go through a couple of really interesting things about this amplifier in comparison to its slightly bigger brother, the Vox AC15. Now, if you didn't know, the AC10 and the AC15 are very, very similar. Ignoring, the later AC15 vibe trem channel that they added in, it's very complicated and similar, or basically identical to the AC30s. The early AC15 and AC10 are extremely, extremely similar. There's just a few kind of main differences to them. It's two EL84s, so why is this one 10 watts and that one's 15 watts, right? So there's little things they did to kind of make, let's say, handicap the AC10 so that it has its own little spot in the catalog and isn't cannibalizing sales of the AC15. The biggest thing on this whole section of the amplifier to point out is the input resistors here. So these are 220Ks. I don't know if you can see those or not, but they are, take my word for it, these are 220Ks and you got the typical 1 meg. Now, 220K is a very odd value. 90% of amplifiers, let's say, are 68K input resistors with the 1 meg. You'll see that in all of the bigger Voxes. You'll see that with Fenders, right? 68K, very, very common. 220K, I've never seen it in any other amp other than these AC10s. So this is actually reduced. It's quite a high resistors, right? So it's reducing the input gain. So what you can do to get it to be have a bit more is parallel in 100K resistors. So 100K parallel 220K, that gives you about 68K or so final value. So that's one mod we will be trying, and I'll show before and after. There are people online that say it makes no difference. There are other people that swear it makes a big difference. So we're going to put that myth to rest and just do it ourselves like we always do on the channel and let you guys be the judge of that. So again, parallel 100K resistors, so handicapped here. And then the other major place it's handicapped is over on this side of the circuit. Now the transformers in the AC15 and the AC10 are slightly different. I've read some conflicting information about it. It seems like there's slightly less laminations, just slightly smaller on the AC10, but that's not going to give you the 5-watt difference necessarily. There's other things at play. So one variation of the AC10 Twin, I believe it's the earlier one. So we've got the output transformer, we got this red wire, that's the center tap, and that's going to one of the filter caps here. The early ones would have a resistor before, let's see, where's the rectifier? So coming off the rectifier, right, this pin right here, pin 3, going to the filter cap, and that's going through a choke, which is these brown wires, and the other end of the choke is going here, and there's your output center tap, and that feeds the rest of the amp, right? So between here and here, there would be a resistor, a large resistor, and I'll show you the schematic for that real quick. So here's AC10 schematic, and if I zoom in down here in the power supply, we can see the EZ81, and then notice there's a 200 ohm 5-watt resistor, and so you've got 320 volts coming out of it right here, and it hits that. That is not present on the AC15, any version of the AC15 I'm aware of, and it is also not present on this amplifier. Now, could it have been originally? Because obviously this has been worked on, and the PT was replaced, the filter cap was replaced, so it's possible, because this is an early amp, it might have had that, and the tech just took it out. But that is going to reduce your voltage here. How much? I don't know, but it will. So that's one thing to know. Now, if I go back over here to a different schematic, you'll notice that it does not have any resistor after the output of the EZ81. It goes into the first filter cap and then through the choke. And that's how this one is set up. So this is an 8 Henry choke. The other one is a 5 Henry choke. So it looks like the earlier ones kind of, or the later ones rather, compensated, took this out, and then increased the Henrys of the choke. So just a little interesting tidbit there. And then moving on with the amplifier. So that doesn't have that problem, but it does have this, well, problem in quotation marks, right? It does have this really interesting setup that kind of puzzled me at first when I first saw it because I wasn't expecting it. It's got these two 100 ohm resistors. Normally you would see those off the screens on vintage Voxes. But here it's not off the screen, right? It's off of pin, was that 7? Yeah, pin 7. And 7 is the anode or plate for an EL84. So this is the output, right? So you got it going through 100 ohm resistors, and then these yellow wires are going to the output transformer. So that's very, very odd. Not something you see really ever, to my knowledge, where you have a resistor kind of right in line with the plates, again, bringing things down. It's softening things down, softening the voltage. Softening is the wrong word, but you guys know what I mean. So very interesting. Again, not present on the Vox AC15. So what we could try is removing these 100 ohm resistors. I'm going to replace them anyways because the install wasn't very good. And just having a wire there instead. And just seeing what that does, seeing if that makes any difference or not to the tone. And then we can add 100 ohm screen resistors instead in place, since this one does not have that, and the other Vox amplifiers do have screen resistors. These are the grid stoppers right here, the 1.5Ks. So yeah, just kind of some really interesting stuff. These are such cool amps and very quirky and a bit different. Now, looking ahead at this side of the circuit, so we noticed we were having some issues with the vibrato channel. So we're going to have to do a little deep dive and kind of try and suss out what's going on there and what is causing the problems. I think we're probably just going to shotgun all of these resistors out, not the carbon comps unless they test bad. I'm going to run through them in a second to test all of the measurements, but all of these other resistors, we'll probably just remove all of those, replace them with carbon film or carbon comp, depending on what my stock is and what the owner wants to do. And we'll clean all this mess up and kind of see if that helps, because there's a lot of very, very poor solder joints in this thing. In fact, geez, some really bad ones right here that I didn't even notice. So we'll do that, and then we'll reassess, listen to it again, see if that's made any improvement. If not, we'll kind of have to do a deeper dive, probably clean all the pots too, basic stuff like that. You can see the 220K resistor is a bit better now. So we will be putting in parallel 100Ks. We might not do it to both. Might keep the low input really low and the high input much higher. I don't know. I'll talk to the owner, see what he wants to do. But I'm very curious to hear the difference there or lack thereof. And yeah, I think that's about it for this. We're probably just going to end here tonight, besides me just maybe a time lapse of me checking all the resistors, and then we'll pick it up tomorrow.